He is an executive producer at Tennis Channel. He has been doing that since 2019. He has had an indelible impact on the sports media landscape, baseball, hockey, the list goes on. And what you've seen from a lot of his Emmy Award winning work is that he likes to go behind the scenes, highlight athletes and what they do and what makes them amazing. Now we're going to highlight behind the scenes Gary Waksman. So this is going to be a little 180 shift here in a neat way. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and also a broadcaster for the USTA. This is the On to Something podcast, and clearly Gary is on to something. We're going to talk about his career, what makes him inspirational, and tell his story and point out all the cool things that he has been doing. And I wanted to start here, Gary, because I know tennis is a major part of who you are. You take a lot of pride in it. So what you are doing now in the world of tennis and media, how much of it is living out your childhood and what you are doing right now?
Well, first of all, Bryan, thank you for having me. And you nailed the intro, and that's the key. That's the key to every show.
Yes.
Once you nail the intro, everything is smooth sailing. So no, but thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I think really, I think what is interesting about this business is that we all, like, for me specifically, I fell in love with sports from day one. Just my dad came home with a newspaper one day. We were growing up in New York at the time, and it was like, hey, look at, it's like the Knicks and the Islanders and the Rangers. And I'm like, what's going on here? And you just kind of follow what your dad does. And I started to get really involved in sports. And he was, born in Europe and Russia, and had the love of tennis and hockey that he instilled in me. And that's just what we would talk about at the dinner table. And, I just became fascinated with not necessarily the results and the highlights, but I always loved just like the little nuances of sports. I used to bring sawdust with me on a tennis court because Ivan Lendl did that and put that on his handle, or just, putting baby powder on my hockey stick because Wayne Gretzky did that, or, so it was always like the little nuances of what these personalities and characters would do. And I think that's what I look for now. And to be honest, like, sometimes I'll watch a tennis match for 3 hours and I couldn't tell you who won or lost, but I'll know, what sneakers someone was wearing, or how, or what racket they use. And I've always been fascinated with that. And I feel like that translates well in this industry, because if you can go, any fan can get highlights, but beyond the highlights, it's, I've always liked to coin the term humans over highlights. I've always been big on that, and that's a huge part of what we do and a lot of what my peers and colleagues do.
The highlights of you as a young hockey player, we're talking about when you're a child. What am I going to see personality wise in a young Gary Waksman with the skates on, ready to check somebody?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. The first time I ever set foot on the ice, I remember my father waking me up at 6 a.m. and saying, all right, we got to be there in 40 minutes. I was like, really? That early? So I set foot on the ice at the World's Fair in Queens, New York, which is literally a stone's throw from the Arthur Ashe and US Open facility. And I remember set foot on the ice, and I fell in love with the team sport aspect of it, and just kind of that feeling of skating around. And that was also a way for me to bond with my father. You kind of score a goal or check someone, and you look up for his approval, and if he's clapping for you, then you're having a great day. So it's really about, there's a lot of family components to it. You look around at family sports participation, and how it connects to your question is that it starts at the core, which is family. When you go to a sporting event and you're in the car with your parents, or you kind of feel the thrill of being there, and them seeing them after a game or before a game, and that's kind of cool. And I think the excitement that I got out of it, to put a visual on it, I was a bit of a dangler, an offensive minded player. I wasn't big on back checking or playing defense. I always rooted for the goal scorers, like Wayne or Mario, or a guy named Mike Bossy, who played for the Islanders back in the day, was my childhood hero growing up. So yeah, just to get that visual, I was just like any other kid, just excited to get out there and put some skates on, and score some goals, and look up at my dad and have a great day doing it.
a visual now of what you're doing, and you might not be gunning for a career in the NHL or on the professional tennis ranks, but I'm sure immortalized within you, Gary, is that desire to always want to get that approval from your dad.
Right.
How do you see that coming through in your life today, even though you're not that youngster putting on the hockey skates and going out there, but you're doing it now in the business world and in the sports world?
Right. And I think you kind of, you do it for yourself. As we get older, we kind of learn why we do things and what makes us tick. And, I've always been my toughest critic. When I put my head on the pillow at night, I want to know that I gave it my all, that there was nothing left, on the table, whether it's, in the office or in the edit room. And, I've been that way. I've been, always very vigilant and almost OCD with everything that we do, because I look at it like a painting. What our world is so different from others who are, let's say, in marketing or advertising or law or real estate, is everything we do. There's a saying, one of my old supervisors used to say, you're only as good as your last edit. Right. And everything we do is easily viewed and judged. Right. So I take that to heart, and that's why, when I have suggestions or notes for editors and they're like, yeah, I don't know, and they don't address it, like I lose my mind sometimes. It's like, because, I'm asking you for a reason. There's a reason behind this madness. Like, let's dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and you'll be happier doing it. So for me, it's like, every piece of content that we produce and deliver is like an art, is like a painting. And we sign our name on the bottom, just like every artist does. And that's usually found, in the credits or in the results. And now, our work is out there on social media and people comment on it all the time. But it's really about the inner self, in terms of, if I know that I put my all into a project and crossed all the I's and or crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, I know that, that's the best I can do. And we put our best foot forward in producing that.
Gary Waksman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So when you look at something that you're behind, a signature feature, a piece you've done, if I'm clicking through the channels and I'm settling on Tennis Channel, how am I going to know what is the first giveaway that it was Gary Waksman behind that piece?
Well, I think to be fair, right now I oversee the content for our international division for Tennis Channel International. We're in certain territories. But as far as what I try to do on the signatures, to kind of put my stamp on things, is I would say that, again, it's humans. It's the human emotional side of it. What can we learn about a certain piece that we didn't know prior to watching it? I think that's very important, because if we don't have any emotion or educational connection to it, then what's the point? So it's always, you try to ask myself, why is someone going to watch this? Are they going to learn anything? Is it going to appeal to the right side of their brain? Because if it doesn't, no one's going to remember it. From literally, that's what differentiates good content from bad content to the individual, is how it impacts the right side of their brain. That comes from a couple of seminars that I took years ago, and it's true. When you watch something, you'll remember the music or a visual element or a shot or two or a unique angle. So it's really like this, perfect harmony of I try not to make it cookie cutter. So hopefully people who watch, they'll connect with it on a more emotional level, and hopefully they'll think of me when they do it, but more importantly, they'll think of the sport of tennis and how that impacts them and how that piece of content had impacted them at that very moment.
Where and when have you felt most emotionally connected to something you covered, in that among all the pieces you've done, you felt most personally impacted by it?
Yeah, I would say a couple of years ago, I was privileged to follow around for ESPN. This was actually before the 30 for 30 brand. They had ESPN Original Entertainment, and they had a series called The Season. And they followed everyone from the 76ers to, Iowa wrestling. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to see any of those, they're phenomenally done. They preceded the 30 for 30 brand. So I was fortunate, and this was during my NHL tenure. I spent a year with the Detroit Red Wings, followed by a year with the Colorado Avalanche. And that's as close as coming as you'll ever get, as I ever got to, living out my childhood dream of playing, professional hockey or professional sports, because we got to ride the bus and be on the private, charter with the team and the camera crew. And you can't help but like these guys. You're spending time in their home and you meet their kids, and you're filming with their wives. When they get injured, you feel the pain as well. You want them to get back into it. So it's hard to, at first when you're young and you're trying to learn, you kind of you have to almost distance yourself from that and think like a producer. When someone gets injured, I remember there were moments when someone would carry it off into the locker room and you're like, oh, I've got to go get that shot because that's my job. Yeah. But at the same time, you're experiencing, you're capturing the pain of a professional athlete, right? But that's the drama that and that's the content that we, try to bring to our, to hardcore fans. So it's that. I would say that project specifically because, as hockey players are tremendous people, and they're just salt of the earth. And a lot of them are Canadian and American and European, and they're just great guys. And you're talking about, I must have covered 12 Hall of Famers over a 2-year period. Wow. Sergei Fedorov, Steve Yzerman, Brendan Shanahan, Nick Lidstrom were on that team, the Detroit Red Wings team. And then the year after, it was the Colorado Avalanche with Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg and Paul Kariya and Teemu Selanne. And, right now, if, the salary cap of that team would have been about 200 million. It would have been about 120 million over the cap at this point. But that's what it was. So it was, you can't help but root for these guys, but at the same time, you have a job to do. You have to tell the story of, good or bad. If a player is struggling for some reason, that's the story. But at the same time, if they're doing great, that's the story as well. And hopefully, you have to capture the ebb and flow of whatever the narratives are, especially when you're doing that brand of storytelling.
How do you like to explore new avenues of storytelling? So say if you were looking at a recent piece of work and then you went back and you said, okay, I'm going to go look at something I did 10 years ago. What's different about the Gary Waksman way of telling stories now compared to the content that you were creating, say, 10 years ago?
2 words: social media. That's what's different. I think the formatting of everything and the scalability is much different. Before it was, you film something, you bring back the tapes, you throw it in the machine, you start editing, and there's one or 2 versions max. Now it's, you've got to version out different territories, different languages. Now you need a 60-second piece for Instagram that's formatted in a 1x1 box, and then a 16:9, 2-minute version for Facebook, and then a minute 15 or 20-second version for Twitter, and then a 2-second version for Snapchat or something, along those lines. So it's really about serving all the different spectrums and platforms that are out there, because you never know, some people like to consume things on different screens, and that requires different durations. But I think it starts with a long form, and then you just chop things down from that point on.
Part of what's made you so successful is this quote that I saw that you wrote down, and it's, if you want to get somewhere quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a team, close quote. How have been working in teams elevated you as a person and also as a professional?
I believe in that quote. I think I stole it from Scotty Bowman, the famous
yes.
Red Wings coach back in the day. But it's so true. If you think about it, and you look at any piece of content that I've been privileged to work on here at Tennis Channel, it starts with development, right? You need a great team to collaborate with. what are we going to do next? Which players do we want to involve? How do we tell this story? When do we tell that story? Then you've got the PR team that needs to reach out to the players to see if they're available. Then you need to hire the camera crews, the right camera crews for that shoot. You've got to travel there. You've got to work around the player schedule. So, and that's the easy part. Then when you're done, then there's the actual production, right? And you need the actual players to take part and give it their all within their 10 to 20 minute windows that you're covering them. And then when you've got the great footage, now you've got to bring that back. Now you've got to ingest that into your editing systems. Then you've got to hire your editor, who's got to come in. So at any point of this chain, if something breaks down, your piece is done. So everyone just needs to be on the same page. It's content and production is the ultimate. It sounds cliche, and I know that, but there's no way around it. It is a true team sport, what we do, because if it breaks down at any level, just like any team sport, you're not going to be successful. It takes buy-in from everyone in the group to just say, okay, this is what we do. We produce premium content that we take a lot of pride in. And that's kind of what you try to be infectious with, that type of style of leadership. And I think that's very important at this level, because you need buy-in from everywhere, and everyone needs to respect the craft and also respect the sport and the content world.
How far back do you trace that leadership that you picked up on?
I would say it's through osmosis. I've been fortunate to work in a lot of great, companies and organizations like, the National Hockey League and Major League Baseball. And now, just starting with Tennis Channel, you look at, our CEO and President Ken Solomon and our head of international, Andy Reef. They give us all the resources we need to succeed. But more importantly, they let us be who we are. If I've always said, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, there's a problem. Wow. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want to be at least third or fourth. And in my case, I've always been more comfortable playing the Scottie Pippen role, not Michael Jordan. Again, because I think that I know what my strengths and what my weaknesses are, and I think good leadership is about knowing what your weaknesses are and hiring people and building teams that can, help you in that area, help you grow, but through osmosis, help the actual team grow. I mean, I learned something new on Zoom calls every day. You hear whether it's a production assistant with an idea for a campaign or a sizzle reel or a promo, to an editor who thinks that we should be doing something another way. There's always that aha moment where the light bulb goes off and you're like, damn, I wish I thought of that. But I'm glad I didn't, because I don't have to. You don't have to come up with all the solutions yourself. You just have to know the good one when you hear it.
You love your work. So when you get a moment away from work, how hard is it to check out for just a split second? Because I'm sure your mind is always going to, hey, let's think about that idea. Let's go down that route for our next story. So when do you allow yourself to sort of deprogram just for a little bit, just for a tiny bit?
It's a great question. It's something that personally I have to work on, because it's tough because I oversee the content on the international side. So don't forget, like when people wake up in Europe, when some of our vendors and camera people and editors, they're emailing me at midnight or 1 a.m. to look at a piece or to get my opinion on something. So it never shuts off then. And then in the morning, you've got, your colleagues who are here on the West Coast, and you strategize and you have those types of calls and meetings. So, and we're in the sports world, and in a tennis world where it's relentless. It's a traveling circus, in a great way. And they just tour and tour and tour. And, the great thing about our sport now is that there's always another match, and you can't really get too high or too low emotionally, in the coverage of the sport, because you're going to miss the next day where something great might happen again. So it's hard to shut off, but I think we need to just do that. I think we're learning more about, the mental health side of not just athletics, but the people who cover athletics. I think it's important to grab your dog and go for a walk on the beach, because that's going to lead to a better idea 4 or 5 hours from now, rather than constantly being inundated and having thoughts in your mind and you can't think clearly. So I think it's, Elon Musk said he usually reserves himself for 2 or 3 great ideas per day, and that's a great. Then he calls it a day. And that's true. I mean, how much capacity do we have? Really, what we're in the problem-solving business. If you think about it, we wake up, and you probably go through it as well, as you check your phone, right? You're like, oh my God, I got to answer these 4 emails and this, and my flight is delayed and all. So it's really about, are you prepared to wake up and solve problems? And do you do it with a smile on your face, or do you do it with a frown? And we choose that every day. But to get back to your original point, I think if we don't carve out that time for ourselves, then all of these are going to be perceived as major challenges and obstacles. But if you kind of approach it in a good way, and you can balance out your life a little bit, you can make decisions quicker and more effectively, and incorporate your teams to help make that.
To get back to your point about dogs and ideas, obviously you have a Pomeranian. How much credit have you given at times your Pomeranian for good ideas?
He gets a lot of credit. I named him Gretzky because he's the great one in my book. He's 10 years old now, but no, it's great. I mean, look, I think that for me, that's it's just mentally soothing to just take him out for a walk in the morning and think about things and think about life. And you're right. I mean, I've thought about, as I walk my dog and look at the results, or those are when the best ideas come. When when the sun is out and you're kind of not expecting it, that's when you'll get a call. Just yesterday, I'll give you a very specific example. I was out walking Gretzky. I got a call, and hey, we have an opportunity to film with Juan Martín del Potro. I'm like, great, I'm in. Let's do it. So good things happen when you're doing good things. And I've always believed in that. And, I think it's important sometimes to step away and take a little bit of a break and allow for those things to happen.
I want to leave you with this, and Gary Waksman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. When have you most felt like a rock star in what you do?
Phenomenal question. It's tough because I remember, I've been so fortunate working with these great athletes, and I remember being out with the New Jersey Devils one night in Manhattan in a nightclub. Okay, and well, I can get granular on this moment. It was a couple, and we had just filmed an episode of NHL Cool Shots, which was just a magazine show for the league, and our host happened to be dating one of the members of NSYNC at the time, and somehow I ended up in a restaurant / nightclub with hockey players, members of NSYNC, boy bands, you name it. And it was just like, that was a different world. And, I think anytime when, you spend time with athletes and you kind of see how young fans and people and people of all ages gravitate towards them, it's interesting to see that. It's hero worship at its finest. And I think that I've had a first row seat to that, and it never gets old. It's super exciting when you see a player or an athlete, a tennis player, or walking just vividly. I remember just a couple months ago, Indian Wells, just watching Andrei Rublev signing autographs for like an hour. Kids are just like, oh my God, it's Andrei Rublev. It's Andrei Rublev, and that's not Muhammad Ali. It's Andrei, and people are super excited about that. So it's great to see that. It never gets old. When you see a young kid's face light up, there's nothing like it. And that's the part of this business that'll never get boring.
So many surreal moments that you've experienced, so many more to come. Gary Waksman, executive producer, Tennis Channel. I'm Bryan Fenley. Gary, thanks so much for coming on and telling your story. Really appreciated it.
Bryan, thank you so much. And, good luck to you. You're hustling, you're doing a great job with everything. And, best of luck anytime you need me, I'm around.